Ta-da! Okay, we're live. That's it. We're recording.
All right.
All right.
Welcome to the show.
I mean, I feel like that should be our anthem, right? Like you should just sing it. You don't want me to do it. All right. All right, here we go. So welcome to Shit You Don't Know, the podcast where real life meets real talk. We're your hosts. I am Laura Beth Martin, and this is
Heather Matchett.
I'm a pharmacist and she's a nurse. Together, we have over 40 years of experience and a lot of great stories to share with you.
And we're diving right into those life lessons, mistakes, things we wish we'd known, moments we could change, and things that we couldn't change that changed the course of your life. So just join us for a mix of humor, heart, helpful advice, and uncover the shit you don't know. Your go-to guide for the things nobody fucking told you.
Excellent. That was excellent, Heather. Speaking of which, this has been a morning. This is episode 1, and I can't imagine what the rest of them are going to go like. But we have spent an hour, just so everyone knows what consummate professionals we are. It has taken us an hour to get our podcasting crap to work. So we made it. Heather has not slept all night. She has been nursing. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't. We can't guarantee a thing. Not a thing.
Not a thing. This is what you after a 12-hour shift right here.
1,000%. 1,000%. Yep. And
steps were made to make myself presentable, but I mean,
same. I wore this shirt yesterday in full transparency, so everyone knows. I did have a shower. That did happen. But I did sleep in this shirt, and I don't care. So, I am off today. I'm actually on LOA right now, which was we've been planning this podcast. You guys are going to get to know us. You don't know us right now at all. But we've been planning this podcast for months, and our schedules are crazy. So I actually had surgery Friday, and we're like, sweet, I have 2 weeks off. This is a great time to do nothing but sit around and talk about shit. So that's what we're doing.
I mean, I feel like, we have a lot of shit to talk about. I mean, honestly.
We do.
Yeah.
1,000%. Yes.
I got it for like 12 hours last night, and there were probably 5 things I thought that we could talk
about. Let's be clear. We will not violate HIPAA, but we will be talking about some things that you guys need to know in life in general, because between the two of us, we've just seen too much, and we must share the trauma. We must. It's a necessity for us to survive. You must share in our trauma. Oh, all right. You want to, Heather, you go first. You do your intro first. You made me talk first in the intro, so you get to intro yourself first a little bit. Yeah.
Also fair in podcasting, I suppose. Okay, so I am Matchett. I live on a haphazardly put together farm in the middle of nowhere, West Texas. Lovingly, we refer to it as Moonrock Number 9. I got here after actually achieving my dream job as a nurse. I was a bone marrow transplant coordinator. I helped the University of Arkansas build their stem cell program for leukemics. And it was a whole lot of fun, a whole lot of work, and a whole lot of stress. And then some shady mess went down, and I packed my panties and moved to West Texas. So now I live here, and I'm continuing my career as an oncology nurse. I, had a few pit stops along the way. I've kind of done a lot of things. Been a director of nursing in a nursing home, done the whole long-term care thing, which is where I was during COVID. So I don't know. I've just kind of spent a lot of time in mostly the oncology space, but also just I have a pretty interesting life story. So, I feel like I've got a lot to offer in terms of sage wisdom and advice and such.
Yep. Yes. Yeah. So if you didn't pick up, Heather is a complete rock star badass nurse. So she will definitely be addressing all of those types of questions. I couldn't begin to touch her knowledge when it comes to that space. That's just the truth. So, yeah, we're excited to be here together. And I don't know, Heather, you want to share anything else, or we want to share the rest as we go along? Is that good for now? You want me to go? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you,
So,
Laura Beth? Tell us about yourself.
tell about me. Oh, it's my favorite thing in the whole world. No, it's not. So I am Laura Beth Martin. I am a pharmacist. I have been one for over 21 years, primarily in the retail space. So that means large corporations, but I owned my own pharmacy for about 9 or 10 years. So I have kind of seen behind that velvet curtain of what goes on in insurance and reimbursement and patients. I spent a year in basically an ICU setting during COVID. I transitioned from retail to that, which was brilliant, brilliant move at the time. I worked in that for about a year, absolutely exhausted and burned me out, as did many healthcare workers. So then I went back to retail. I have done nursing home consulting as a pharmacist. I did compounding for, I don't know, 16, 17, a long time. Okay. A long freaking time. Compounding is where you make medicine from scratch for people, typically with specialized needs. So yeah, that's my professional sort of side of things. I live in Southwest Arkansas, where I was primarily raised. I was actually born in Northeast, or yeah, sort of in the Northeast Arkansas area. Really born in Missouri because the town I lived in was so small there was no hospital. So there you go. But yeah, so moved to Southwest Arkansas. Have lived here 35 plus years, so I consider that my home, and have stayed here for, really long time. Went to school, came back, have a doctorate, all the things, lots of kids, complete chaos at my house. So Heather and I have that in common in different ways. And yeah, so not, I'm not as exciting. My professional career is not as exciting as yours, Heather's. Just
I
not.
don't know. I mean, I feel like,
It's
but
not.
conversely, like I feel like you're so much more knowledgeable. So
Here's
it's
why. It's like a pop quiz all day long as a pharmacist. Well, you never know what some person or doctor or nurse is going to call you on the phone about. And you get used to it. Like if somebody had told me that when I went into the career, I would have probably run screaming. But you get used to it. So I think you just sort of learn to. Plus, also, I have ADHD.
a poster child over.
Okay, I didn't know. We forgot to discuss if we were disclosing personal things about each other.
Oh yeah.
But we both have ADHD. And so honestly, being a pharmacist and having ADHD, it's like a perfect mix because you can hyper focus on drugs and you learn all the things about them. So, yeah,
Yeah, you
I,
definitely. I feel like with me, uh, hematology has always been my home because that's always been my special interest. Like,
Mhm.
uh, that's why I love it so much.
Yeah, yeah,
And
that makes
uh,
sense.
I think honestly, the thing that keeps me in the game really is if I couldn't do oncology, I don't know what I would do. Maybe I'd be a FedEx driver. I have no idea. Um, but nursing for me just
You could
really,
get B's. You
yeah,
could get B's.
I have, and I've got, I could do it. But
We were just discussing I wanted B's and she can't have them. She can't have them yet. My husband hasn't said yes, but he hasn't said no. And at my house, that's a yes. Maybe not today, but that's a
dang,
yes someday.
probably talk about like how we know each other, which
Yes, I think that's a great idea.
so,
Radio silence. So we know each other because my husband, Stephen, and her
my husband,
husband.
they were BFFs in the schoolhouse a long time
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
And
From
by all the
what
friends,
age?
you came into Steve's life, completely corrupted him, made him stay home on Friday night, and made him your baby daddy.
Pretty much. That's what people say. People say that. So I think how old were they when they met each other? Like 10 or younger, maybe? I don't know.
They were the two that have been out of the group. I think they have been the
Yeah,
friends. So I think
maybe.
it had to have been grade school.
Yeah, I think you're right because I know for sure Sean wasn't till junior high, I think, or
Right.
roughly. So yeah. Um, so yeah, maybe, yeah, grade school. And so funny story, her husband's first wife set me up with my husband on a blind date. when I was 16 and he was 18 because I needed, there's a school dance. And of course, I was like the super nerd that everybody was my friend and nobody wanted to date me. So she felt sorry for me. She said, "Hey, my boyfriend's roommate can go with you to this dance." And I was like, "Great, the pity date." And now we've been married 27 years. So very
For all peaks, I can say that I too set up on a blind date by my husband's ex-wife when we were working
such a
together.
better story. It's such a better story. Mine's a weird one, but yours is so much better. Go, tell it. Tell it.
So,
Didn't know
so
we were going there today, guys, but welcome to episode 1.
so we were actually, I had just gone through a very messy, very nasty divorce, and it was not nice. And so I was not interested at all in dating anyone. And she was like, "I've got the perfect person for you," because I'd mentioned that I like the Doors, and Jim Morrison has like become a whole thing with us. It's kind of weird actually. But so she was like, "You would love him." And I'm like, I don't want to date nobody. So she ended up inviting me over for a game night where he was there, and we've been together ever since. So
There you go.
there you
Yes.
go.
She
So
was apparently a very good matchmaker, not a great wife. Maybe. That's all I'm going to say about it. Good matchmaker, maybe not so talented at all the other things. But anyway, so we know each other through our husbands and over. How long have you guys been married? Like, it feels like forever, but it's not. I know, but it feels like it.
oh my gosh. Okay.
A long
So
time.
like,
Annabeth was a baby, was little
no,
when you guys got married.
because Lucy
Yeah.
will be 18 this year. So,
Yes.
so we've been 19 years, and we were
Yes.
together roughly. So I would say 21, 22
Yeah.
ish.
Yeah.
Nerd.
So we were invited to their wedding. Had I met you before? I don't remember. That's such a long time ago. I feel like I had.
Yeah, I feel like we did. I feel like we met like that Father's Day because I went down to Hope with him for Father's Day, and I think it was like
Yeah.
right time.
Yeah. So we went to their wedding, and I still remember dancing in the living room with Annabeth because she was little. She was like 3, and she was so excited. And I just remember twirling her around the living room. And that's my biggest memory of the day. I don't know if she remembers it. I'll have to ask her. But so we've known each other for 2 decades and, not always lived in the same place, mostly haven't. For a short period of time we did, but we were both working like crazy and had little kids. And then she moved off and shit happened that we'll get into in another episode. And Chad called my husband and he was like, "Hey, by the way, FYI, I think Heather and Laura Beth need to chat like one-on-one instead of just like when we get together." And so we did. And in the middle of that phone call, as we were just discussing everything about healthcare and patients and family, and she's like, "We should do a podcast." And I was like, "I've been trying to get Steve to do a podcast with me and he won't because it's his worst nightmare." And and then at some point, so we agreed. And then at some point in the phone calls, we continued to talk about all the horrible things in life. One of us, I don't remember which one of us said we should call it "Shit You Don't Know" because there's so much of it. There's so much of it. So much. So much. So
Absolutely.
much general public you don't know. Trust me. I don't care who you are. And probably so much we don't know.
True. Maybe we'll learn it too while we're
I
doing
hope so. I hope so. I'm open to it. I mean, that's the only way you grow.
Right.
All right. So are we ready? I think we're good. You ready?
Yeah.
We're going to dive in? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So episode 1, which we have not even told you what's about, and you're still here after 15 minutes. Good job. You get a gold star if you're still watching this or listening after 15 minutes. But our first episode, and it's not going to sound sexy. It's not. But I'm telling you, it is. And it's important. So our first episode, we are talking about how to avoid financial disaster related to end of life. And so because Heather is in oncology, obviously she sees a lot of end of life situations. I, on the flip side, see patients in the wild so to speak, who have things happen to them that are quite unexpected. And suddenly they are either dealing with end of life struggles or they've been moved into hospice. And so we both have seen some really, really sad, horrible, horrible things, and have discussed multiple times about what is needed for end of life from a financial perspective. So we talked about it and agreed that our first episode was going to be the financial impact or aspect that people just don't know about. And then our second episode is going to be, Heather, you want to explain that one real quick?
So I think we will touch on the actual like death and dying. What to expect in the hospital if you've got to put a loved one in a home, how that works.
Exactly.
How to and some of that we can talk about a little bit today because a lot of that
Right.
is also in protecting your assets,
Yes.
especially
Yeah.
if you are trying to eventually qualify for Medicaid, institutional Medicaid, as it seems. So,
Yes.
but definitely, I've seen a lot of like shady situations where, because cancer patients, I don't know if the general public knows this, but they're generally okay until they're not, and you
Yes.
don't have a whole lot of time to screw around. So when things do turn to actively dying as a cancer patient, that is not the time when you're trying to, tell your kids your telephone password. And
Yes.
where all social
Yeah.
accounts are.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I've seen it. So
So Heather, do you want to start?
yeah. I was like, sorry.
Okay. So Heather has been through this. We've both dealt with it personally, but she has literally walked it and what that looks like. And so I think it's real appropriate for her to start us off with that. Yeah.
So yeah. So like my mom passed away several years ago of ovarian cancer. And my mom never shared anything with me about any of her financial situations. I tried when we realized that she wasn't going to get any better, when we put her on hospice, to kind of like try to figure out how I can help her, because
Right.
the situation is I am your only child and I live 1,000 miles away. And, there is a significant chance that I'm not going to be present when you pass. And how do we, figure all that out? And the logistics, of it, obviously it's wonderful, but then trying to prepare, because if there were a contest in the United States, how many craft supplies you could put into an apartment per square foot and still be able to and not be considered a hoarder? My mother was gifted with that ability to win that contest, hands down. So,
no, you've seen my studio. I don't know.
I donated an entire U-Haul van full.
Wow.
2 vanfuls. And then I still have half of a shipping container of craft supplies.
Holy mackerel.
She was a killer.
Wow. And that's just the physical. Like, we're discussing financial aspects because we can discuss more along this in the next episode. But I think people very often overlook the physicalness of dealing with people's estate. It is not just, okay, somebody passed and now we have $50,000 we have to divvy up. That's not your biggest problem usually.
No.
So
When
you had to go on site, right? Did you tell me that? Like, you had to go on site to the apartment after and do all the cleaning.
All of it. So I had to dispatch, her nest.
Yeah.
I had to dispatch the nest. Like, I was really, really lucky that the people that I hired to do around the clock care, and we'll get to that in a second, because I was actually working as a hospice nurse at the time that she was going through this, and I was like the only person in my area. So I couldn't get to her as fast as I wanted to because I was trying to tie loose ends because they didn't have anybody on my pay. It was a hot mess. Now, looking back on it, I wish I would have told them to eat a dick, because
it was your mom.
That was
It
my
was your
mom.
mom.
And I shouldn't have had to deal
100%.
with whatever tomfoolery they were dishing out while I was going through that, especially as a hospice nurse. Come on.
Yes. I was just going to say, and I think that's a good point as healthcare providers. we are often not able to be there for our families because we are expected to continue caring for other people's families. We can
Yeah.
talk about that one in episode 2.
And so,
I have
like,
some big feelings about that.
right, right. So
Yeah.
I knew, like, when I got there, of course, she had passed away by the time I was able to get to her. And I had to, those last couple of the last week. So when I talk about how cancer patients just go down quickly, I was actually there the weekend before she passed away. And I had talked her into, because I knew, knowing what I know, that once she became symptomatic and was showing signs of decline, it was going to be really long. And so she did tell me that she did have some money in her retirement account. I had no idea how much, because she wouldn't talk to me about it. I had never seen a shred of paper, none of it. I had no idea where her insurance forms were, where her bank statements were, none of it. All I had access to was an app on the phone with her banking information and get my name on the bank account. That's it.
Oh.
So when I went up there that weekend before, she had cashed out her 401k or whatever, her whole retirement fund, and had whatever was left over whatever was in there put into an account. And of course, rational as my mother was at this time in her life, she wanted to go shopping for a sewing machine.
Of course. We've got those 50 projects and we have about 4.7 days to get it done before we meet Jesus. That makes perfect sense to me as a crafter.
And you know what? I was just like, I kind of viewed that as like, okay, she's basically buying me a sewing machine.
Yeah.
That was,
That's what was happening. Absolutely.
he didn't really
Absolutely.
belong that well,
Yeah.
fortunately. And so, but crafting was always kind of our love language, right?
Sure.
I get there, and I've had to, thank God I had access to the bank account, because of course, when you find out how much 24-hour-a-day care is,
So much.
you'll
So
pee
much. You will pee your pants and puke at the same time, I think.
So,
So I have some quotes for that too.
I had to pay approximately, I think it was $32 an hour for home.
Yes, that sounds correct.
And the person who
Very
was
close to that.
providing the home care was probably only getting about $15 of that. So,
Yes.
so luckily that sweet woman cleaned my mom's apartment. Because my mom
Oh,
she didn't really require a whole lot. She had never
right.
been medicine, nothing like that. So she wasn't really requiring a lot of hands-on care. That sweet lady, she earned her money for sure, because she really, really did me a solid and helped me out. And I got there, I had to deal with all of the dismantling of the hospice equipment. So that was step one. I'm coming and picking everything up, which they want to do
Right.
immediately.
Right.
Want to let you sleep on that. They want to be picking up that stuff the same day.
Right. Because it's got to go to the next person. We got to hopefully sanitize it before it gets there. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then, just like, it was kind of like a nightmare situation, because I've got this apartment.
Kind of like it was a
Night
nightmare.
I have 7 days to clean it out. I'm planning a funeral. Luckily, 2 days prior, she had met with the funeral director, who was a family friend of ours, and had like picked everything out. So really all I had to do was write a check, which was fine. I was like, thank God. Because I, was already stressed, and then trying to like get the rest of my family up there, which, when you have small children and kids in
Right.
trying to coordinate, and having to get kids money to come for the funeral, it was just a mess. And we haven't even gotten to the estate part yet. So,
Yes.
luckily I'm her only child. It was good. There was nobody to fight with. Everything that was there was mine. I was pleasantly surprised to find out that she had a lot more money than I thought she did. Thank God. Because even with the cremation, I think her funeral was probably, around 7 or 8,000. And that was probably, I did, because I had the capital to do it at that time, I did choose a really nice urn, and, I fixed her up for the afterlife. And so, but flowers, and then the church, and then the, luncheon, and then all this crazy stuff that you're just having to deal with, the whole social aspect of it. And then the combing through the mountains and mountains of paper and unopened mail to try to figure out where all of her insurance policies were, because she did tell me
Right.
2 days before she was unconscious that she did have 2 insurance policies. She could not remember where the paperwork was. So
I
I had
mean, that's not uncommon.
yeah,
It's not uncommon.
I had no idea where any of her bills were to be paid to. I didn't even know who her landlord was.
Wow. Yeah.
So so it was a real clusterfuck.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
I just remember when I put the final like box in the back of my car, just completely losing it in the street, because like I hadn't even had the chance to really grieve her or
No. No. Mm-mm.
even like spend some
Mm-mm.
luckily when I first got there, I was by myself the whole first night, and I was able to just kind of be in the space and sort
Right.
of process, everything, because it was quick and dirty. I had been up there the weekend
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
She fell on I went home on Sunday. We had a fight,
Of
as
course.
we
Of course. Of course.
and so
Can we be with our mamas and not have a fight? I mean,
and
some
and
of
so
us can.
I went, and she fell on Tuesday. The hospice nurse called me and said, I really don't think she can be by herself. And I'm like, I just left there. And so
Right.
let me like arrange my stuff. Let me get back. And so I hired the agency. They came in. They were great. And then just they were doing daily visits, and so having to deal with all the phone calls from the nursing staff and everything, and um it was a lot. It was a lot. And then like literally having to sift through her belongings and trying to decide in that moment, like there are many things that I gave away that I wish I hadn't, just
Right. But
because
you didn't have time to process. Yeah.
I didn't have time, I was like, yes, no, trash, trash, resale,
Right.
garbage, crazy. So I
And
am a strong advocate for having your end of life shit together,
get your
because
stuff together, people.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
I think, and I've seen it. I couldn't tell you how many times. And I know, obviously, you saw it personally, but I know you've seen it working in the space that you have. But the not even having a list, like, there's not even a list of what they own, where their accounts are. And so I think if both of us had one thing we had to say to people is have everything written down and let people know where it is. There tends to be this secretiveness of, I don't want my kids to know what I've got. And let me tell you something, when you're dead, they may never know what you had, and what you intended for them, they may never get. And I think that's the saddest part about it, is for those of us who had very hardworking parents and grandparents, if you do not let people know where stuff is, if you do not have it organized to some extent for them, it may never get to them. And so that hard work was for nothing,
Very,
absolutely nothing.
it's very
And
true.
that's, yes, I mean, because, eventually that asset is going to go somewhere where it's unclaimed, depending on what it is. And if it's something that needs tax paid on it and you don't pay it, then it's going to go back to the county or the state that it's in. You'll never know. They will never know. And I would say that Heather and I are reasonably intelligent people, um, who you know how to navigate resources, or ask enough. For sure, we're mean enough to ask enough questions until we get an answer. And
True.
there's a lot of people who aren't, which no shade to them for not being that type of personality. But you don't need to assume that your children are going to be dogged enough to find these assets that you've got basically hidden from them. I'll use one example that I think is just, so my dad growing up he didn't want anybody to know what he made, like no one. It was a big freaking deal. You were not allowed to touch, not that we would have touched his paychecks or anything like that, but like he would not discuss how much he made. He would not discuss anything remotely related to that. So I didn't care growing up. Like, why would I have cared as a kid? But when my brother and I got ready to go to college and we needed to fill out FAFSA forms, he refused to give us his income information. So that was a big stumbling block, not so much for my brother because my parents ended up paying for his education, but for me, it was a huge problem. In undergrad, I could not borrow any money. because he would not reveal his income. And then by the time I got to grad school for pharmacy, I was married. And guess what, though? In grad school, up to a certain age, they require your parents' income because they expect parental contribution at a graduate level. Now, that may have changed recently, but that's what it was like when I went. So he finally, with my mom twisting his arm, had to give it up, with the understanding that my mother was going to fill the form out and I would never see it. Now, that's the biggest much of nonsense I've ever heard. Like, I could not have cared less what my dad made, but it affected my ability to get student loans and finish a career. So imagine what it's like for your child when you pass and you've never told them anything. They don't know how to find your social. They don't know where your Medicare card is. It's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. Your children cannot take your assets while you're alive. Like, that's nonsense. They would have to steal your identity. So quit being paranoid, people, and make a comprehensive list of your assets, your passwords, your accounts, where they're at, the addresses, the phone numbers of these people, like everything. If you have pets, they need to know like who the vet is. Don't assume that your kids know because you mentioned one time that, Scout, your lab, goes to this vet, that they're going to know that, because they're not after you've died. They're not going to remember that,
No, I mean, and even that, like there was an aspect of that I had to deal with because my mom had this old cat that he had a tumor in his mouth. And so
Oh,
then after dealing with all of that, I had to put my mom's cat down
oh
because
shit.
he had metastatic cancer too. And I was like,
Stop
oh my,
it.
you know,
Stop it.
it was just a lot. Like, people don't think
That's
about.
too much. No, they don't. And I think because you didn't have access to the financial information you needed, like you said, you couldn't even begin to grieve. Like, that week is hard enough just trying to get your kids. Hey, and as moms, when your parent passes, yes, you're hurting, but you're also going to try to protect your children.
Yeah.
And that was true for me with my great grandparent or my grandparents, which were their great, because they had a relationship with my children. So when my grandmother and granddaddy passed, it was really hard on my kids. They knew who they were and they loved them. And so I can't imagine you having to be in that position where you're trying to get your babies to you for this funeral and you don't have a clue other than a bank account, which thankfully it sounds like it had some money in it for you to take care of things, but not everybody's parents are like that.
No. And trust
Like,
me, because I had no idea how much she had. I literally had, she had, when her ovarian cancer came back, it came back in her brain. And so she had already been doing a lot of really weird things.
right, right.
So like, she had wrecked 2 cars and had been told that she was like needing to go on hospice and like went out and bought a car. And I'm like,
What are we doing? No.
yeah, like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
need to be driving. Why would you go secure yourself to an automobile? And
Right.
which
Right.
I had to
But
drive
they're
back
not,
then.
yeah, they're not thinking clearly, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was
Well,
a
there's
lot.
also would you say that the basis of a lot of people not handling any of the aspects that are involved with end of life have to do with just denial? Like, they can't face that fact that they are going to die or that they are dying. And so if we don't do anything with this stuff, if we just leave everything like it is, then it's not going to happen anytime soon, if at all.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And I mean,
It's same for me.
I had the money. I thought about, why don't I just pay the rent for a couple of months and like go back and do it? But it's such a long journey from here to there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's like from where I live in Texas to St. Louis is about a 16, 17-hour drive. So,
No.
just too long to
Yeah.
out,
Yeah.
once I found the things, um, taking care of that part was just a matter of making sure you had enough copies of the death certificate, which I recommend. They say 10, I say get 20, because everybody's going to ask you for
Worst
one.
case, you have extras.
Yeah. I mean,
Can you have too many copies of a death certificate?
I don't think so. I think I
I
still
don't
have,
think so.
but
It sounds like it's like popsicles. You can't have too many in the freezer. You
right.
can't.
And everybody wanted a copy, everybody
Mm-hmm.
needed one to close an account
Sure.
or,
Sure.
uh, some of those things. And so, it was a lot, like doing the closing of the bank account. Well, I didn't close the bank account. I kept it the way it was. I was advised to do that by a person who does taxes.
Mm-hmm.
They said, don't transfer that into your bank account. Like, you were
Just
added, but
wait.
yeah, don't do
Just
any of
wait.
that.
Yeah.
And because, I can take care of a lot of the things for the estate. And, there's a certain amount of money that you can get as a one-time gift or whatever. And
Yes.
you don't have to pay,
That's
And
true.
so, um, so definitely knowing the laws in your state certainly helps. My mom didn't have a will. Thankfully, I'm her only kid. I did manage to get her to sign a power of attorney, like Hail Mary, in
Right.
case, anything untoward happened, or, for some reason we needed to go to the hospital for something, then I could
Right.
act decisions for her. Um,
I think that's a really good point for us to touch on too is power of attorney is incredibly important no matter how old you are. So my family has visited a lawyer that just does estate planning. And I did eventually convince my parents that it was time to do that as well. Thank you, Lord, for small favors, because nothing was prepared for them. And one of the things he told me was that his gift to his children when they turn 18 is a power of attorney. He immediately has them at 18 years old set up a power of attorney because he's like, people don't think about the fact that as soon as you are a legal adult, it can be complicated for your parents to take care of your business. So if
yes.
you move off to college and they're not on your bank account and you've got your own apartment and all these things, that's great. You're living your best life as an adult. But if something happens to you and there's no POA, it is a mess. And so that's something I would recommend for everybody. POAs are not expensive to get. A lot of times you can do them online. I personally am going to trust a professional. That's just me. And I'll be glad, like in the show notes, to put his information. I don't know how many patients and other people I have referred to this is all they do. It's all their company does. And they are kind and professional and follow through. Like, I have never had a complaint. And I've sat through 2 or 3 of their consultations for us, for my parents, and for some other people. And everybody's situation is different.
Yes.
That's important to realize too. So a friend gives you an advice about end of life and they're like, hey, all you need is a will, or all you need, unless, unless they are a lawyer who has been, I just would not, you don't know that was going to apply to your particular situation, because my situation is incredibly complicated. We have 4 children. We have one with special needs. There's different types of trusts that have to be set up for him and for us. My parents' situation was night and day. Like, theirs was so much simpler because it was just, mom and dad, and then us 2 kids. And so theirs went a lot faster and it cost them less money. So I think that that's important. People, like, don't think that because you have a will that you wrote up and you signed and you went and got notarized at the bank, that doesn't mean it's legal. It's got to go to the courthouse too. Like, there's a lot of things to it, and a will is not going to protect your assets.
No, it doesn't. And certainly, especially if you're in a situation where, like, say you have a spouse that is needing long-term, and you are
Mhm.
not, say, retirement age. Um, nursing home care is like $5,000, $6,000 a month. And so you would need to put
There.
yeah,
Say it
yeah,
again. It's how much where you are.
5 to 6,000 a month.
Cash price where I am, it is almost $9,000 a month.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it highly varies. I mean,
It
on where you,
does. It really does. Yes.
and nursing homes be wanting their money now.
Oh yeah, they gonna get paid. They gonna get paid. And I
So
don't blame them for wanting to get paid, but I'm just saying, like, if you haven't planned for that, if you don't have things set up. So an example that I have from years ago, these folks have since passed, but it was a husband and wife, and I didn't know until I had known them for probably 7 or 8 years that they were actually divorced, but still said they were married, like they still were like, because she could not qualify for Medicaid while they were married.
Yeah.
And she needed care beyond what, I mean, these were people that did not, let me be clear, these are not people trying to skirt a system where, they don't have to use their money, even if they were, that's beside the point. But these were people who had a car and lived in like Section 8 elder care apartments. They did not have any significant assets at all, but they still had enough income through Social Security that she could not qualify for Medicaid.
Yeah. I think
And
the limit for Medicaid is $2,200. I think it's $1,200 if it's just for a single person. So, there's a lot of people finding themselves, I mean, and quite honestly, in my own personal life, it's, I have a situation in my own personal life where you have to really try to figure out, okay, if push comes to shove, what are we going to do?
Right.
And the start of that is putting everything I have in a trust so that, my property, my stuff cannot be held against me if we were to ever need any kind of assistance.
So what Heather's referring to trust-wise is that you can work with lawyers who are specialized, who will take all of your assets and guide you through the process of setting up a trust. And so the trust is held and it's viewed differently by the government. And so you yourself do not have the same financial responsibility in medical situations, especially, and in tax situations when you have a trust set up. Now, some people are going to, and I know that this was something new for me to learn, because a lot of times we all think, oh, well, we're trying to avoid the death tax with the trust. Okay, Heather and I don't have enough money to have to worry about that. Unless all of y'all listening decide you want to make us millionaires, like bazillionaires from this podcast, we're never going to have enough money to have to worry about that. Because you literally...
I'm highly in favor of that.
Same. Like, we will 1000% allow anyone to help us get there that would like to. But as of right now, I'm pretty sure that neither of us have any sort of assets worth over $13 million. And we don't. I don't know that I have an asset worth $13. I'm still probably in the red when it comes to assets. So the death tax everybody talks about, like they're so afraid of, like you've got to have a really big estate for that to matter. However, and in healthcare, what you'll hear people talk is there are worse things than dying. There are worse things than dying. And one of them is to have to be in a state which you can't care for yourself. You can't transfer. You can't feed yourself. Like, you need around the clock care. And that is, to me, one of the worst situations I could be in personally. And I've seen patients and family, and I would say the vast majority would agree that there are far worse things than dying, because there's that in between. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that in between isn't a week. Sometimes it isn't a month. Sometimes it's years. And you will
gone into homes of patients that I have admitted that have been living some kind of way for a really long time because they could not afford to do otherwise, or didn't know that there were options available to them that they could do other things. And so there are definitely ways, especially with the trust, especially if you need long-term care. And most nursing homes, like, their financial person will tell you these things, like when you're trying to qualify, because of course, we want to do everything we can do to get right. That's a customer. So, we would work a lot of times with people on getting people in on trust and trying to, evaluate what their actual stuff is. So some of that stuff happens, like if you do need long-term care, it kind of forces you to have to
Yes.
put together some of that stuff. But the lead up to that, there's a lot of variation in how that comes to be. And, some people end up needing that kind of care when they're not Medicare age. And
Yes.
that's the
Yes.
whole other slew of financial pitfalls that you have to try to navigate. And especially if the person needing care is the main breadwinner of the family.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have long-term care insurance? Do you have disability insurance? Do you have short-term? Do you have a way to have an income while you're
Recovering, hopefully.
hopefully recovering? Yeah.
Hopefully recovering. I think it's important, I have seen patients think that, well, if I just take these assets and also put them in my children's names, then I don't have to pay a lawyer and go. And I'm just going to tell you that may not work either,
Right.
especially if you wait. So for the state of Arkansas, it's 7 years that an asset has to be out of your name before you will qualify for Arkansas Medicaid. And so when you go into, and Heather may be able to explain this better, but when you go into a nursing home, if you are Medicare age and your admission is related to a hospitalization, you may have a certain number of days, typically 100. There's qualifications that go along with that before you have to private pay. But just because you need nursing home care doesn't mean Medicare is going to pay for it the whole time. That's not how that works. After a certain number of days, you or your family will be expected to pay for it, and you become private pay if you don't have long-term care insurance. And you may have never even heard of long-term care insurance. It does exist, or you may not be able to afford it. So having your assets and an estate set up protects those assets from being used to qualify you or to disqualify you from Medicaid. That sounds, Heather, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I mean, that sounds that like it varies state to state. It
Mm-hmm.
depends a lot too on whether or not the state receives federal dollars, because that sort of dictates, a lot of times
Mm-hmm.
how the look back period is.
Mm-hmm.
Here in Texas, I think it's 5 years. But there is some exception. I don't think owning a home counts against you. So there are different things in different
That's
states that
true.
Medicaid is a state program. So there is
That's
some
true.
variation state to state on that. And in terms of Medicare, you get 100 days of long-term care that is paid for in varying degrees. So I think the first, it's like if you have traditional Medicare, which please, please, please get traditional Medicare.
Yes, that's
That's
a
a
whole other show topic. Not
that's a whole.
today, Satan. Not today. We can't talk about it today, Heather. That is
But
a rat hole we have to go down another day.
I
But
know
yes,
it is in its nest, and but
just
you
putting
will.
it out there. Medicare Advantage plans are the devil. We will tell you later why.
Yeah, 30. I think it's 30 days get paid at 100%, and then after that percentage that it goes down through your 100 days to where you get to you're paying a certain amount of the copay, which I think it starts out like 100% for like the first 14 to 21 days. And then after that, it's like an 80-20, and kind of those things go backwards until you get down to it to where you're paying a 20%. You're paying a 20% to 80% copay, depending on where you are in your 100 days. And hopefully, you can get out of there by the time you're 100.
Hopefully. And we do mean that. Like we don't want anybody to have to be in a long-term care setting, not because I have any feelings about long-term care. I mean, I do, but that's not today's show. But every I just think in general, patients do better in their own home environment if they're able to care for themselves.
Yes. And I
But
think
you've
that
got,
biggest pitfalls with going into long-term care in terms of, like long-term survival is that you
yes,
don't know how demented a person is until they're
Mhm.
outside of their familiar environment.
Yes,
And a
yes,
lot of times they crash and burn in a short period of time just because that
yeah,
mental line becomes so much more pronounced, and
yes,
that it causes them. So,
yes,
to me, that's also a very good key component of planning what the end of your life, what you want that to look like,
right.
with the understanding that if dementia should happen to you,
Hmm.
How do you want to be cared for? And when do you want to make that transition? So, you know,
I will say one of the things that our lawyer said to us that I thought was really important, because we'll talk about medical power of attorneys in the next episode. But he said, when you're choosing a POA and a medical POA, he said, and you think about your family. For me, he was saying you think about your children. He said you need to consider the child that you trust to handle things when the world is on fire, basically. He was like, it has nothing to do with how much you love your children, but especially if they're old enough, what they are capable of handling and what they're not, even with support, because, my kids would need support. And I have a friend who's, we've asked, if something happens to us, obviously this is a child who will be handling things, but she will need an older adult. Will you step in and help her? And she was like, absolutely. Because she wouldn't know how to hire a real estate agent and sell the house, like liquidate assets. She would need help with all of that. And that's understandable. But he was like, I have the hardest trouble with older people understanding just because you love your child doesn't mean they should be in charge of your assets. So if you can't trust your child to do what you think needs to be done, you need to pick someone else. This isn't the time to worry about hurt feelings. It's the time to make sure that what you're asking will be done.
right.
The way that you want it to be done. So don't assume, if you've got and we all have family and people that we love, that just because we love them doesn't mean that they don't have issues and they don't need to be the people in charge of a state. If they can't balance their own checkbook, if they can't pay their own insurance, if they don't know how to file their own taxes and they're grown up, then that means you may have to pick somebody that's not a blood family member to be the executor and to make sure that that child gets what you want them to have.
What you're saying is I'm not qualified, Lauren.
It's what?
Qualified to handle my own business.
That's not true. You're trustworthy. You know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying. If you ran the myeloma unit, I'm pretty sure you can handle an estate problem. We're talking about cousin Jimmy who got his car repoed last week. Okay.
Messy situations.
Messy.
One of my least favorite situations is that I had a hospice patient one time who was the most manipulative narcissist I have ever come into contact with.
Sure.
And the things
about that
was doing in their family to cause strife and harm on purpose at the end of their life was like, telling one child to steal money from her closet that she had in a purse and not tell anybody about it, like tell the other child that they were getting the car, but no, telling this one, no, they were getting it, and purposely and I'm just like going, guys. And it ended up the day they died being a knockdown, drag out fight. And I thought this could have all been avoided, and
yes. It's important too that I think people realize you need to do these things while you're sound mind.
Yes.
And that means there are going to be times as we go through life stages that you may have to update your estate information, the POA, things happen, and that may have to happen at different life stages. However, please don't wait until we're in the hallway and they just had to do, your spouse just crashed and they're in there trying to resuscitate them. And, you're in your late 70s and you don't have anything set up. That's not the time because you're emotional, you're going to be exhausted. All of this needs to be done and talked about through your whole lifespan with your partner or your close loved ones that you're going to trust to handle this for you. We need to take the stigma off of talking about end of life, financial issues for sure, as well as others, because you will not be in the emotional state of mind to make the best decisions when all that's happening.
No. And you certainly want your family fighting about what to do.
No. That's the thing. Like you talked about not being able to grieve, and that breaks my heart to think that my kids would be in a situation where I can't imagine them arguing. I mean, they might, who knows? But I mean, I can't imagine it. Not over that. But
Mhm.
that they can't even grieve because they're trying to figure out what dress I'm supposed to wear or where my life insurance policy is. Like, what the, like to me, it feels like such a derelict of duty as a parent and loved one to leave that kind of mess, that kind of bullshit for your kids to have to deal with. When, if you are a loving parent, you would want to make your passing as easy as possible so that they can grieve you in a healthy way.
Mhm. Yes. And to be rational about it. I mean, like when my mom, I mean, I had to like force my mom to retire. I was
Yeah.
like, you
Yeah.
can no longer drive yourself to work because you have 2 brain tumors. Can we
Yeah.
make stay home?
Yeah. We we have we have faced similar things and are facing similar things where there's some really, really important things that need to be done, and we cannot get that person to do them or to give permission to do them because they're just they can't handle it right now or whatever. And I'm like, I don't understand. Like at this point, if you've got a POA, then you need to do what needs to be done for them because they're at an emotional point they can't do it anymore. Like
Right.
that their level of caregiving has reached the point where their and medical conditions are they're exhausted. So they're not thinking as clearly as they would have 20 years ago. So just it's okay. And I think that's the other thing is that we need to give our children and our family members and loved ones permission to take care of things when they need to be taken care of, no matter what we say in that moment. And that's hard because we're giving up that control. And that's what this is really all about is, well, we're losing control. And I got news for you guys. You ain't getting out of here alive. You're going to lose control of everything before you die. That's how it works. That's how it's built to work. And you would do yourself and your family a huge favor if you would just sort of condition yourself to the idea that you're going to get to a point where you have to trust other people to make those good decisions for you. If you've raised your children to make those good decisions for themselves, can you not trust them to make them for you when you're 89 years old or
Right.
75 or maybe even 55 and have a massive heart attack and you're on a vent and they don't know what to do and you
Yeah.
haven't talked to them about it? Like, get your shit in order.
I mean,
That's all I know to say.
Chad, like biological father had, I mean, because he was raised by his parents, of course,
Right.
his will was on a piece of notebook paper. That's all we had. And he
Yeah.
had property, he had 2 pieces of property we had to dispatch and try to, so and that was and then the way he had been living
Yeah.
was, we're out there in the middle of the woods in a FEMA trailer trying to figure out what is worth, at great
Yeah.
peril and danger ourselves. I'm like, is that a snake? A snake? Or
Right.
is there a rat in that drawer?
Did we just set it on fire? Can
Yeah.
somebody sneak down here in the middle of the night
Well, and
and
the other is
oops, was there insurance on it? Who knows? Because you didn't make a list.
you don't take care of those things. I mean,
Yes.
honestly, in that situation, I'm sure we lost a great deal of potential income having to
Oh
sell the
yeah.
property was because,
Yeah.
it
Because they
just there
weren't able to care for it. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
no
I
way for it. So
I I think the bare minimum that people need to realize is there has to be you've got to have a master list of your life,
yeah.
basically. There are tons of end of life planners out there, as morbid as they sound. You need to sit down and fill one out. You just do. That's the bare minimum is something that's an end of life planner. Um, Best case, you need to find a lawyer that deals with that. And personally, I would honestly say, and don't get me wrong, I love our personal lawyer and I've trusted him with many things, but I did not use him for my end of life stuff. I just did not. I wanted somebody that's all they did day in and day out. It's like, my primary care doctor could probably put a chemo port in if I needed it, but I don't want him to. I don't want him to,
Yeah.
you know, I don't. So I would really, and I know people are gonna be like, well, I don't want to spend the money. Well, you don't know how much it's going to cost until you get a consultation. My parents was like, I don't guess they care if I tell. Um, they'll never listen to this. So I want to think it was $1,100 or $1,200, which I realize is a lot of money. But if we're talking about not losing assets, it's not a lot of money.
Oh,
You
totally.
know,
I would
when you're
say that
talking about losing, like how much you probably had thousands of dollars in craft supplies you donated. I mean, that could, you know what I mean? Like,
I can't even imagine. I mean,
so like the eBay reseller in me just cries, y'all, every time she tells me that story or a part of it. I'm just like, "Oh," like everything in me just, you should have sent the trailer to me. But anyway,
I know.
so
I actually have out there right now, just for your eBay seller satisfaction. I
she's going to
probably
make me
have
cry.
boxes of vintage patterns dating back to the 1960s because my
Okay,
mom.
well, I'm going
So,
to claim those. I'm just going to claim them at some point.
so I've like, I've, and it is hard, even still. I mean, it's been several years, and it's still very difficult to go out there and go through that stuff. You
Yeah.
know, there's a
Yeah.
lot
Of course.
attached to, just all of that. And like I said, it was the things went to a good cause. I mean, they
Sure.
had
Sure.
to go at her church. She liked to go and participate, so I donated all the craft supplies there that I didn't bring home with
Yeah.
me, and copious amounts of craft supplies. Like I will
Right.
be out of my mother's stash most likely until the day that I die.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
With that much. I will say that you did say your mom, although it was 2 days before, had planned her funeral. That's another thing I would really encourage people to do is go plan your funeral and prepay for it. You can make payments. If you can make payments on a vehicle or like an ATV, like we live in the South, so obviously, four-wheelers, etc., boats, whatever. If you can make payments on something, you can make a payment on your own funeral so that
Yeah.
that check doesn't have to be written.
Some of those pre-need plans are really nice. And the reason that they're really nice is because they also do this really cool thing. Because I was researching this for myself not too long ago, is that say I go ahead and I buy my pre-need and I'm making payments on my pre-need and I have a child under the age of 20, some places it's 25, some places it's 27. A child under the age of 27, if something happens to them, they will pay to bury your child out of
Wow.
these kinds of, and of course you'd have to do the research, but some
Right.
places 21, but some do longer than that, like for how long they can stay on your insurance. So,
Right.
but and I've known people that has happened to, that they lost a baby
Did not
or
know that. Yeah.
something like that, and because they had that pre-need, that baby's funeral was completely 100% taken care of. So not only
Yeah.
does you as an older adult, but if it's an insurance policy in a sense.
Right.
Um,
Right.
you know, also substitute that with, say you feel like that's morbid or whatever, through your car insurance. Most of the time, you have to have car insurance. You can add on a $20,000 life insurance policy for not a whole lot of money a month. And as long as you are paying that then policy, because I'm like, that was one thing that my mom did too, was she had a life insurance policy through her car insurance. And when she was unable to drive anymore, I made her keep that. I'm like, you need to keep paying on that. Like, I want
Right.
the
Right.
bill get paid, because like I said, I had no idea how much she had, in her,
Right.
but that was, I knew $20,000 that for all intents and purposes would pay for the funeral and whatever I needed, whatever emergency things had to be taken care of, that would take care of it.
Right.
And
Right.
just knowing that $20,000 was there was kind of like the saving grace in my sanity when she was
Sure. Sure.
panicking on, like, how many dance costumes can I sew at the last minute to pay for my mom's funeral? Or,
Right.
selling tamales to pay for their, funeral. We have people that come through the hospital all the time selling plates of food because they've got a family member
Oh
downstairs in
yeah.
GQ that's dying and they're trying
Well,
to
how
raise
many
money.
how many GoFundMe's have we seen?
Oh my God, and I always try to throw $5 at them because I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry,
Yeah.
it may
Like,
be a lot, but yeah, it's just incredibly expensive. And then having to
mhm.
deal with all that on top of your grief is just not fun.
It's no. And nobody wants to go down and have to pick their parents' coffin out. They don't want to have to, like, just have it all done. Just have it all done.
And
And then
do is that if you don't do it, you're going to end up with a county burial because, you know, and navigating that process is difficult for a person who's grieving
Yeah.
because you have to basically agree to whatever pauper's grave rules they have in your state. Like here in Texas, you're not even allowed to put a grave marker on that grave for 10 years. So, like,
Yeah.
just get a plot with a plaque and a number on it, and that's it.
And I think that's a whole other level of pain, is to
Yeah.
know that the person that you love, or I can imagine it would be, the person that you love is in the middle of this field with people and just out there by themselves, essentially. And for a lot of people who have some really tightly held religious beliefs, it would be extraordinarily painful. Personally, I've told my kids, just cremate me and, like take me to the beach and the ocean and just throw me in. I'll be
Yeah.
back to Jesus. It does not matter to me. I don't care. I'll have all that taken care of for him. But there are people, like my mom, if she knew that's what was going to happen to her, she would be devastated. Like before she died, like if she realized like, oh, hey, I don't have the money or my kids aren't going to have the money. And if I felt the way she did, or if that had happened to her parent, my mom would never stop grieving the fact that her parents were buried in some random field. Like she just wouldn't. And I don't think there's any shame in that. I want to be really clear about that. Like we do the best we can with what we have. But
Absolutely.
if you can avoid putting your children or family members through something like that, please do.
Yeah.
Please do. And the thing is, it's not going to hurt. It's not going to cost anything to call a funeral home and say, I want a consult and get an idea of what you're looking at. And then you'll know, like, hey, this is because I think also a lot of people have an idea, well, it doesn't cost that much to bury someone. Well, you've never been in charge of it, apparently. You've
It,
never been the one writing the check because it does cost a lot to
yeah.
bury someone. So don't
I
assume it's not
average
going to be a big deal.
$10,000.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and even a cremation, $1,000 in some places. So, of course, all that's variable. And sometimes, when I worked hospice, we would call around and try to get the best price for people if there were not a
Right.
lot.
I mean, could we just go back to being like Vikings and they could just put me on a pyre in the backyard? Does that sound tacky?
Be on a pyre. He goes, light it with a bow and arrow and, just like float me in the middle of the tank or something. It'll be fine. And I'm like, I think that's illegal, but I mean, it's so wood. I
But I mean,
mean,
to be fair, I am one of the thriftiest people you will ever meet. And it is obscene to me that it would cost $6,000 to set me on fire. I know it's a health code thing. I get it. But do not comment and send me nasty emails because I'm sure morticians that do that are lovely people. I just don't want to pay for it. I don't want my kids to have to pay for it. So I'm going to pay for it. But anyway, so yeah, pay for your stuff ahead of time. Other thing too, I think is please don't leave a ton of debt for people if you can avoid it. Like we all know life happens and things happen. But I also think that being, 75 years old and like financing a house or a car might not be the best use of your money.
yeah. And it is a real pain in the ass to have to divest your like that because like I had possession of my mom's car. It made me a nervous wreck. I don't know why, but like here I have this car that I am not paying on because they won't let me make a payment. I can't make a payment, and I'm just
Because you weren't on the account?
Yeah, as I'm just and it's not mine. And did I want to? And she was paying. Like she wasn't making the best financial decisions, so she had like a 20% interest rate on this car loan. Like it was ridiculous. And I mean, it was a Volkswagen Bug that one of the newer ones. And she had said, well, you could just use it. And I'm like, yeah, but that's a payment that I have to make if I
But
assume
I
this
have to pay for it. Yes.
right. Free mom, like
Mhm.
it doesn't.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
having the car in my driveway for like 5 months while I waited for them to decide they were ready to come and get it.
Yeah. That was going to be my thing was, could you give it back? But they have to, what a nightmare.
It's a
Like
whole
what an
thing.
absolute nightmare.
So
I
thanks,
think
Bob.
that good job. I mean, I get wanting to have a vehicle and I get that like maybe get one you don't have to finance at some point. Like
Well,
I'm a big believer in paying shit off.
yeah.
Like
Well,
I want to be out of the debt.
my My mom, I mean, and I'm just going to be real honest with you. When I called her credit card companies and told them that she had died, I didn't offer to pay the balance, and nobody asked me for it. So
Good to know. Listeners, also, we didn't say this at the beginning because I was going to say it at the end, but I'll just say it now. We are professionals, but anything we share is for informational and educational purposes only. So Heather is not telling you to stiff your parents' credit cards if they die.
I'm just saying nobody asked me and I didn't offer.
She's just offering information about a situation that happened to her. So let's be clear. But I would totally do that too. Not gonna lie. I would. I'd do it. All right. Are we forgetting anything? What are we forgetting? What are we leaving out?
We've covered all the bullet points.
Yeah. And I'm sure people will have questions, which we're more than happy to try to answer. We're really excited about this podcast. Like, we love talking to each other. So, of course, we just assumed you guys would love listening to us talk to each other.
Well, we are crazy. It's kind of fun.
We are. Well, I think a lot of it has to do that we're both in our 40s and we have completely lost our filter. To be fair, Heather lost hers first. Not sure if she ever had one, and that's okay. But I had a real tight muzzle for a long time, and I don't have it anymore. So it's been a steep learning curve, and she has been my Obi-Wan for that. That's the right reference, right? That's the right Star Wars reference. Obi-Wan Kenobi's like the like the Jedi Master. I got that right. Yeah. Okay.
Very good. Very good.
I love Star Wars, but sometimes the characters are a little confusing. And they've changed over the years. Like the actors playing them have changed, and I get confused. Anyway, okay. So I think that's it for today's episode of Shit You Don't Know. Hopefully, you know more now than you did before. So we hope you're a little bit more prepared. Don't forget to subscribe and share with a friend. Leave us a review. Send us any comments, questions, concerns. And until next time, stay curious and make lots of informed choices. Take care.
Bye.